Welcome, ladies and gents, to another episode of Legacy and Lux. Today I'm joined with a woman that captures what real leadership looks like, not just in title, but in character too. From the Australian Federal Police, where she helped shape out the leaders in the most critical organisation and most disciplined organisation in the country, really, to now being able to lead her own leadership coaching business and being able to help define and shape leaders. This is a conversation where I'm joined with Samantha, who will tell us all about leading with clarity and authenticity and what are the true ingredients to being able to be a good leader and what can help you to get to that point too. Now I'll hand it over to Samantha over here. Thank you for joining us, Samantha.
Hello, thank you, Yara.
Thank you. The first thing I think we should ask you is give us a snapshot of what your journey was like. You know, you've had an evolution when it came to your career. So if you can give us a little bit of a journey, like a snapshot of that journey for the listeners. And
Yeah, sure, thank you. So I started out in my career as a forensic scientist. So I spent 18 years of the early part of my career in forensic science in a particular specialty. There's crime scenes, forensic chemistry, disaster victim identification was a specialty. So I worked with the Federal Police, which meant that kind of a typical day would be working in the laboratory examining a seizure of drugs mostly. I might go to a search warrant. I got deployed overseas a number of times to help with, civil unrest or international investigations or interstate to help interstate partners and so forth. And then I moved out of forensics and I went into culture and inclusion for a little bit. I call it my cameo in culture and inclusion because it only lasted 3 months. There's a reason why, and that all happened during COVID. And then I moved into leadership development, which is actually where I really wanted to be at that point. I'm about 18 years into my career and I had a real vision to work with leaders and to transition out of my career in forensics, and I managed that inside the Federal Police. So I stayed with the Federal Police for I think 4 or 5 more years working in leadership development. And then I moved out of the Federal Police into state government. And again, I worked in leadership development as a manager. And I did that for a while, and now in the last 12 months I've started my own business.
Congratulations.
So thank you on a whole other part of my journey of my career.
Yep. No, that sounds really exciting. I think that's the best feeling ever and it's very exhilarating as well, starting your own business and kind of leading your own way.
Exhilarating, scary, exciting. Yeah. I feel so thrilled in so many ways. I have a lot more ownership. There's so many things involved in it.
That come along with it. We'll dive deeper into that a little bit later into the episode. But when you look back, did you imagine your path would take such a shift from forensics and investigation and science and then leading to people and leadership?
At first glance, it seems like a very odd transition or move. It almost seems like worlds apart. But in fact, when you dig a little deeper into me and who I am and what's always interested me, it's not as unusual as you might think. So, for example, I think I was probably 6 years into my career in forensics, and I did a deep dive into personal development, into how humans develop. I was interested because of my own personal development. I wanted to get into a formal leadership position. I wanted to be the best leader I could be. So I bought so many books. That was a lot of what I read out of hours. I immersed myself in it, and I was doing it to work in leadership within forensics originally. And I think over time, as I grew as a person and matured as a person, I started to grow out of forensics. And this was already a natural desire. Like, I'd already trained to be a coach. In fact, I left the Federal Police to do coaching, and then I came back. That was a bit of a false start the first time round. And I came back into forensics and continued. So it was always there, and I started to, at some point, weave it into my career in forensics until a point where I felt it was time to fully transition, and that was its own journey in and of itself. But there's a few elements that carry through though. So I have a very scientific, analytical mindset, and I still bring that with me into my coaching, to working with people, really trying to withhold judgment, looking at what the information and the data tells me, being super curious. So many elements of my training in forensics serve me so well as a coach. It's quite uncanny when you look at it. So, yeah, it's been a more smoother transition than might seem on the surface, actually.
Yep. Yeah, I would imagine it seems very daunting to begin with, but having gone through it now, you can see that it's served you well, because I think you've got a unique set of skills that you've managed to filter through into a leadership business. So what initially drew you to the Federal Police and joining that, and forensic science in general as well?
Such an interesting little story here. I wanted to get into forensics from the beginning of year 10. So way back at school, I was looking at careers that combined my interests. So at the time, my favourite subjects were chemistry, and I really loved legal studies. I mean, at that point, I hadn't started studying it, but that was my interest for some reason in law, and I didn't quite know how I was going to combine them, but I remember going to the careers room and there was a poster. I still can picture it. There was a poster and you could combine the subjects you liked and it would give you an overlap and suggestions of careers that combined those interests, and forensic science was one of them. Now that I think about it, it seems quite odd back in, 1993 or something. It wasn't a very popular career at all. And they had just started a forensic degree, or about to start the first forensic degree at university in the whole of Australia in Sydney. So I set my vision on getting into that. So really that was the beginning of my interest. It wasn't specifically to get into the Federal Police per se, but I wanted to get into the industry. And I actually failed getting into that degree. I like to share this because I think it's a good reminder. It's been a good reminder for me lately as I running my business, that I didn't get the marks to get in, and it took me another year to eventually try again. I got knocked back again in getting into the degree, and a third time lucky I got in and I completed that degree. And again, I wanted to get into the workforce. I would have moved to any state, I would have moved overseas. I wanted to get into the workforce in forensics. The Federal Police happened to create an opportunity for that. But again, I failed twice. So I applied, I got knocked back. I applied for another position, got knocked back. Again, third time lucky. I didn't give up on my dream, even though I was accepting it, I was going to go in another direction. So I held on to it, and the Federal Police, I really landed the most amazing job, I think. I just loved it so much. So I was very grateful I stuck with it. But it wasn't all smooth sailing.
It wasn't an easy way to get to it. But that also speaks to pushing and not letting being knocked down stop you from achieving that dream.
Yeah, I mean, I had a backup plan and I was following that, and I happened to at the same time get a job at a pharmaceutical company. The same week I got offered the Federal Police position, and I had a decision point. And do I stay on the track that I accepted, or do I follow this dream that I've had since I was, 15 years old? And I couldn't not give it a try in forensics, even though I would have earned more money and I could have had a lot more, success perhaps in other people's eyes going the other direction. But there's something in me about service as well. My whole family work in service industry, in schools, in hospitals, in government. It's kind of in my blood. So that was a really natural fit for me to work in an organisation that was serving the community in such a big way. So that was a big driver of it as well.
Okay. And the work there that you would have done would have been often high stakes, quite confronting at times. What sort of mindset would you have had, or critical qualities do you think would benefit to have through that?
A lot of this, I came in with some of this and I had to grow it and develop it working in the environment. Definitely there was a grit that I had to draw on constantly. And what I mean by that is we would sometimes have to work on jobs for long hours through the night. You couldn't leave. You couldn't just say, oh, I'm tired, I'm giving up. Sometimes you were deployed and there was a limited time frame, or you had an urgent turnaround of a case. You had to push on. Yes, you had some backup teams that would come and replace you, but there were so many times where you really had to push through. You needed to be able to be flexible. So again, you have a goal you're trying to achieve. Like we might have had to do a quick turnaround of an exhibit that we needed to do an examination of and get a quick result, and you may be actually doing it off-site at a place that you didn't realise you didn't have all the equipment you needed. You have to be adaptable, you have to be flexible, you had to figure it out and just find a way. So there's, I remember I was in Indonesia and I was delivering crime scene training to senior police officials in Indonesia. It was pretty amazing. I was 26 years old and the person that was with me, supporting me, she was 24. So there was two young ladies teaching forensics and crime scenes to these mostly male leaders and we were, I would say we were very much out of our depth, but we didn't have everything we needed. We actually totally underestimated it. It was a completely different environment. We found a way. We adapted. We makeshifted equipment so we could have the practicals. We used whatever resources we could get locally, which actually was better than trying to bring resources from Australia. Mm-hmm. They talked about the way they do fingerprinting at that time was they didn't have fancy special tanks like we did. They put super glue in a Coke bottle lid and put it in a plastic bag with the item and let the sun heat up the super glue, and they made do. And so we learnt a lot from that, but you had to be able to still adapt and perform at the same time. So flexibility, grit, resilience, determination, but care and compassion, mm-hmm. and really, I think also knowing your limit. So, when you say things were confronting, yes, you staying focused on the bigger picture, what you're trying to achieve, really helps you get through some difficult scenes or examinations, when you're in the morgue, or, staying kind of focused on what you're trying to achieve for the victims or people. That really helped me get through. But there were times where I just was at my limit, and I had to make the call. Mm. An example of that, when I was in Netherlands, I was deployed overseas to help with the investigation of the plane parts of the MH17. It was a plane that had been shot down over Ukraine, and I spent 3 months in Netherlands helping the Dutch with the investigation. And at one point they did invite the families to come to where we were doing the examination, and I thought I'd be okay, and I couldn't stay that day. As soon as I heard the family and their distress, I just said, I'm tapping out for today. I'm going back to the hotel. I need to be able to stay focused. Yep. So knowing your limit.
Yep. And finding that balance between being confronted with images like that and being surrounded with that, but looking at the bigger picture. And I think, would it help as well knowing that, you can fall back on your family and have that support, whether it's friends either, that you can...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Knowing what you need to come back to your centre. Mm-hmm. So I am an external processor. I think my husband will attest to that. He, is the most amazing partner supporting me. It helps me to verbally debrief and unpack things, or with colleagues. Sometimes it's appropriate to do that with colleagues who have also been involved in the situation, and or not sharing things that you can't share with other people. So really picking the right person, but knowing what I need to get the right support. I've always had my family's, that will always be there for me. I think that foundation for me is, I don't think I realised it until I really needed it, just how valuable that is, to just always know that they're there if I ever need them, and they have at times in my life where I've really needed to draw on that. But just even on a daily basis, dealing with stress and pressures of work, having a strategy to manage it. I don't just have family and friends. I have other support structures, like I have therapy, and I have other modalities. I do meditation. I do things that help me recenter, recalibrate, work through my stuff. Yep. That's really important, I think.
And has helped center you and keep you focused. Yeah, that sounds really good. Well, how did the culture of the AFP as well shape your views on teamwork, responsibility and leadership very early on?
Teamwork, I think, was one of the best things, because the level of camaraderie that I experienced, it's like no other. When you go through really difficult experiences with a group of people, that is so unique and hard to explain to anybody. There's a bond that is created, and you can't do it on your own. Like, you heavily rely on your team in that environment. It's make or break, like you have to. So I think I took it for granted because I came straight from university into that environment, and so I think I'm really grateful for that. I understand what it means to lean on your team. In terms of responsibility, there's a part of me that innately takes a lot of responsibility. It's natural to me. My level of my integrity, my commitment kind of lends to me really taking. I'm always highly responsible for what I'm doing, making sure I follow the right technical standards, doing the best that I possibly can to the highest quality. I had a lot of people around me in my environment that were the same. So again, I don't know if it's the type of people that were attracted to the job, and we all kind of reinforced it with each other. So we had very high standards in the team and the environment, like in forensics that we work with. And the federal police in general, I would say, is the same. And when it comes to leadership, I mean, I could talk for hours about it, but there's a few things that I learned. I came into the culture, I came in learning about leadership through the federal police, because that was my first experience in the workplace. And there were some good things and not good things, I think people get that everywhere. I learnt sometimes what not to do. But then when I first got into leadership or was acting team leader, I emulated styles or methods that now in hindsight were not the most effective. And what I mean by that is I was hypercritical. I had standards that I think were unrealistic and unsustainable. So I would I wasn't as forgiving for people's humanness or mistakes. There was this sense of harshness, and I thought that was how you had to lead and hold standards and call people to account, but in a way that wasn't leading with compassion. So I learnt the hard way, I think, early on, where there were some ways of operating that was not going to get the best out of my team. Mm-hmm. And I think the methods there was a desire to want to produce good work and good quality work and things like that, but there wasn't the balance that needed with it's not just about output. It's not just about the results you get. It's how do you work with the people, what's the process that you're using, and how do you make it sustainable? So I feel like that's something that I did have to learn personally.
Yep. It speaks a lot to your leadership skills, though, that you have taken accountability, you've reflected on that, and you've actually been able then to leverage this to uplift yourself and be able to be a better leader. Because I think nowadays a lot of people struggle with self-reflection and holding themselves accountable. Like on a day-to-day basis, I think if someone doesn't from the outside criticize you to say, and not in a way that's offensive or anything, but just to say, hey, you could have said this in a better way, or you could have been more compassionate. Some people just don't realize they can be very blindsided to it.
So true. And I think there was this archetype of you have to come across strong and confident, and that's what's expected of you, and being decisive. And, that wasn't actually a natural fit for me, to be quite honest. So I would kind of put that persona on, and I didn't really, it didn't really land very well for people. I did damage to relationships. People lost trust with me because they didn't know, they didn't feel safe with me to be able to, admit mistakes, or, because there wasn't the level of compassion that was really needed. But my natural style was to be like that. It was just, modelled off people before me that may have been, didn't show that kind of leadership. So it was a bit of a learnt the hard way type of thing, but you're right, being able to be open to the feedback, to being honest where things weren't working, and then working through what do I need to do differently.
Yep. And that's very admirable, because I think leading with authenticity is the best way you can be a leader, because when people respect you and they look up to you, they're more inclined to follow you rather than just being a leader in title only. And we've seen that work across a lot of people from different industries, where people feel more comfortable following a leader that they truly trust and see as a role model, because then they want to follow in those footsteps, and you have a joint vision towards whatever goal the organisation has. So you mentioned earlier that you've moved from analysing evidence and crime scenes to suddenly analysing people, behaviour and mindset. What skills, if we can deep dive into that, were, not critical, but how were you able to leverage those skills into moving into leadership and coaching?
It's more from hindsight that I realised what I bring in, more so than trying to diagnose what it is that I had.
Yep.
And intentionally bring it in. So kind of looking at my style and how I operate as a coach, what I bring to my profession. I mean, I coach one-on-one, but I also design and deliver leadership programs for leadership cohorts, mostly at executive level. I work with with teams and work with team dynamics. And being able to, I think there's one of the main things is withholding judgment as much as possible in the moment, and kind of allowing things to unfold. It's quite interesting in forensics. You don't want to jump to conclusions. You're trained to just pay attention to the evidence and let that speak for itself. So there's that aspect that serves me really well. Being really curious serves me so well, because I'm deeply interested, and I'm interested what motivates that and why is that, and getting underneath the deeper motivations and drivers for people. That curiosity. Even with forensics, it's the same. Okay, well, that's interesting, or that doesn't seem to add up. What's going on here? And, okay, so I think we need to do some more testing here, or that's really served me well. And seeking the truth, that's a commonality across both. So in the context of forensics, of course, it's what happened and who was involved, and trying to uncover the truth of who did what type of thing. Whereas in coaching and in the leadership development arena, it's okay. So what's the truth? You've got a perception. Somebody else has an experience of you and your leadership. Are you listening to what other people are sharing? Are you taking in the information? Are you learning about yourself? What is driving you to behave the way that you're behaving? Really trying to uncover more and more levels of truth of what's going on for you in the moment as a leader, and supporting leaders to do that. And that's essentially what my role I see is a really guiding leaders really gently into really deepening their understanding about themselves, but then what to do about that, the skills and capability to shift that, work with your habits that are not effective, and in a practical way.
Yep. That is such an interesting shift and overlap of skills that you can have across both, because from the outside, especially when you haven't worked in forensics and you're not a leader or you're not familiar with leadership, it's an interesting way to look at it where you wouldn't think there would be any overlap of anything, and from what you say, there's quite a bit. Now, the one thing I'd be interested in, and I think a lot of the listeners would be too, is the transition. Was it daunting? Were there moments of self-doubt? Because I think a lot of people have moments where they want to shift careers, or, they're like 10, 15 years into something that they no longer feel passionate about it, and they want to make that move, but there's these daunting questions and the what ifs, and then they never make that move because of it.
100% daunting and scary, and I didn't even know the path. I looked at myself. I could have stayed in forensics. I could have worked my way up in leadership in that arena. Would have been an amazing opportunity, but it wasn't fulfilling anymore. I remember looking at the newer recruits coming into forensics and their passion and their drive and their enthusiasm. I didn't have any of that anymore. And it just, to me, I feel like life is too short to stay doing something that's not fulfilling for me. And I always had this dream, and I thought, I have to. I just for my own self pursue it. Now that actually, my first step, like I said, I moved into culture and inclusion team leader first when it was my first role out of forensics. And the reason I was able to win that position is because the previous 2 years I had worked on culture change projects. So one was a volunteer role where I put my hand up to be the chair of a committee for New South Wales at the Culture and Inclusion Committee. And essentially that was birthed out of a big initiative the Federal Police wanted to do, was shift the culture around the conditions for females in the organisation. And I felt very passionate about that. So I did that on top of my full-time role. But I loved that. I learnt a lot from that. And that actually gave me so much experience and examples to allow me to work in a role that was leading culture initiatives, because that's pretty much what I did for 18 months. And I learnt. Like at the beginning of that, I was not doing the greatest job, but I kept at it and I got better. And the other bit was a work health and safety transformation project, which essentially my colleagues nominated me for an Australia Day Achievement Medallion, because that was a massive endeavour. Was not easy. And again, I learnt a lot about how do you drive culture change from the inside. And so that gave me more than enough experience to get this position. And then due to structure changes and quick changes I had to make for COVID and pull teams over here to another area, essentially I ended up in the Leadership Centre, and which is actually eventually where I wanted to end up. So I somehow it got gifted to me. So I don't even, to this day, I can't fathom how that happened. I was so happy because it is where I wanted to eventually be. And I felt, so first of all, I did feel massive self-doubt. I kept thinking, well, I don't have a formal qualification in this. I don't have degree. My interest and my passion is fantastic, but that's not enough. It's not enough. And I thought that others would really struggle to accept me in that environment, because everyone in my whole branding, everything about me had all been, I'm forensic scientist. So it was my own internal interference that was actually the biggest challenge in all of that journey, more so than anyone else. I'd never experienced any negativity from anybody else. So it did drive me to study a lot behind the scenes. I was constantly reading things, I was learning. So that's a positive in that way. But the self-doubt that came with it kind of did actually drive me to overwork myself. So after a few years, I was getting to burnout stage because I was trying to overcompensate. So that was a bit of a lesson for me. But even letting go of my identity as a forensic scientist was hard. It took I had to grieve that old me. I had to, it took time to start to feel like I was a leadership development coach and consultant and leader. It felt like a fake fit at first. Like it wasn't fully, didn't feel like fully me. But eventually over time, a little bit of faking it till you make it, and just kept showing up. I kept showing up, trying my best and getting results. And so that in and of itself just grew its own momentum.
I think it's a lot of the time internal challenges that we face more than external environments, but it's phenomenal being able to sit across from you and hear how you got through it. You definitely have the drive, even listening to you speak right now. Like you've been pushed down several times, that you didn't let that stop you. You lost your passion for something. You had the courage to stand up to yourself and say, I just want to find my feet somewhere else. And you did do it. And I think that's a message that's beautiful for people to hear. And that you got there in the end too, where although no matter what point you are in life, you can still make that move and be courageous about it. And it will pay off. It's not a matter of if, it's a when. You just need to put in that extra effort. The hours that you put in after hours of work, of reading and educating yourself really paid off in the long run too. So that's phenomenal and great to hear.
And it's something that I'm actually drawing a lot on at the moment. As I've entered into running my own business, again, I'm starting something new. So reminding myself of that experience, that stick with it, you will get there. It doesn't happen overnight. You've still got a lot to learn, but it doesn't mean you don't have a lot to offer already. You know, that kind of essence that I've taken away from that transition, whenever it was nearly 7 years ago, is something that I'm constantly drawing on, especially the tough days. And when I want to give up now, or I think, what am I doing? You know, and I doubt myself, I remember that and draw strength from that.
Yep, no, that's great. Looking at the entirety now of your time at the Federal Police, what did you learn about leadership from there?
A lot. I do want to, there's a couple of things that I want to highlight. There's an interesting dynamic with power when you're a leader, and then with the Federal Police in and of itself has this rank, it's paramilitary rank structure where there's certain authority, legal authority that comes with your rank. So it's another layer of power that you have to navigate. And so I learned that I think it's really important that leaders, especially in that environment or any environment, really understand the power and authority that they hold and how they use that. And when do they choose to lean into their authority, and where do they choose to use their power to actually give space for others to step in and take some of the control. And there are times in the policing where it's emergency services. That means that when a crisis hits, you need more directive leadership. That's appropriate. And then there are times where when it's not crisis, you're not trying to save a life, you're not in the middle of a major police operation and you need to make it, an urgent, quick decision, where you can step back and be more collaborative and allow others to contribute to the decision making, and knowing when that adaptability of when to step in to leaning in and leaning out, and how to use your power and understand the power dynamics that you hold. I mean, there are times where people enter into a meeting, and even just the way they've set it up, that the power dynamics are, you want people to feel safe and contribute and be honest, and you've set it up in a way that hasn't encouraged that, and yet you're the authority in the room. So I think you get that everywhere in any industry with leadership. I think being aware of that's really important, but there's more so when you've got someone in a uniform with a rank structure that carries its own extra level of authority, because there are times where you have to follow direction. It's what you have to do. Like, it's part of your obligation as an employee that at times you must just follow direction. And so really understanding the power that you hold and using it really wisely and respectfully and appropriately is super critical.
And I think it's a learning curve for everyone, even as they climb those ranks. Again, because as humans at the end of the day, it's just finding your feet and seeing what the organisation operates like, and looking up to your leader, and then you step in their shoes, and then vice versa, where it's then to those below you that look up to you, and it just filters through that way.
I really love what you're sharing, and you're reminding me of another element around my experience, is that there was a tendency to be a bit unforgiving of people that made mistakes in their leadership or their journey. And I think that's not very helpful. I do think it's important that we are quick to learn, though. You being very willing to learn from your mistakes, be accountable, fail fast, but that wasn't actually encouraged in that culture. I mean, you can understand the idea of failing in a policing organisation isn't fabulous, because it can have pretty big ramifications at times. So I can understand that, generally speaking, but being able to have an ability to be human and make mistakes and learn from it and then grow. There was a little bit of a, people got crucified type of vibe. And I don't think that's very helpful, because it then encourages people to be silent about their mistakes or try to hide them, and rather than being open and then also allowing others to learn from it. So that's something that I'd love to see continue to improve and
grow.
Change.
Yeah. I think, again, it's about accountability, and as circumstances change and new generations start coming up, it's definitely something that leaders can always emulate within themselves and then pass down to those below them. And that's how it helps really uplift that feeling and that value of still being human. And at the end of the day, knowing that although whatever the consequences can be, if something does happen, mistakes do happen, as long as you know it was an honest mistake, and we can strategize again and say, well, what could we have done better to avoid it from happening again?
Yeah. And that leads into the authentic leadership piece that you kind of raised at the beginning. But it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of self-conviction and integrity, and it's scary. It is, because you don't know what the result, what's going to happen to you or how it's going to affect you, but I think that's what I would love to see more of in any leader, is leaning into that fear and being willing to learn from it and allowing others to learn as well.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's quite common across a lot of organisations as well, where no matter what it is, if someone makes a mistake, if it's a huge one, the ramifications can be quite severe. And because leaders bear that responsibility, it sometimes happens where it can be taken out the wrong way, or the way someone resolves it is not the most appropriate. So it's definitely, I think, an issue that can be looked at across a wide variety. But a good leader is one that can understand that and reflect upon the situation and know what the best way to approach it would be.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting point that I would like to raise with you is I know that the federal police, like many policing and even technology industries, is very male-dominated. So what is your experience navigating leadership as a woman in an environment like that?
Oh, it is. It has its added challenges, without a doubt. I'm not going to lie. I've been reflecting a number of times on my experience, and they did a big change initiative with the federal police to try and shift the culture around the conditions for females. So I can only speak more from my personal experience, and I know that the organisation's done a lot of work to really improve things. But my experience, I would say the most difficult time was when I was in my 20s. The later I got in my career, the less impactful it was actually to some degree. I think combination of me getting older and mature and, maybe not so young and naive to some degree. I don't know. And also times were changing the older I got. So things that were acceptable in the past, not as acceptable, later in the years. So I can say, though, that it did impact my leadership journey in that, it's hard to kind of capture for others in a way that really explains why it really delayed my career. So, for example, I found myself wanting to hide a lot. And what I mean by that is I definitely would get more attention than I liked, or like I'd be friendly to somebody and they might think, oh, she likes me.
Yep.
And I'd have to deal with that all the time. So I was always second guessing my behaviour, trying to hold back. So that affected that aspect. I already had a lot of self-doubt. I don't think that was very helpful. Mm-hmm. So that's on me. I carried a lot of self-doubt and that probably oozed out of me, So I need to own that. But I did have a colleague that I, started with, and together we were kind of going through training together and so on. But his confidence was 10 times more than mine. Mm-hmm. And what happened is when I would be allocated as the lead forensic investigator and he was there coming to help me, the male officers would go directly to him first off, and he would never then direct them to me to say, oh, no, Samantha's in the lead here, because it was my responsibility to make the decisions. I had to document everything, like I was the lead, and he would just take over. And I remember finding that so frustrating, and I've had many conversations with them to say, could you not do that, or can you direct them to me? And yeah, and then it still didn't happen. So that little extra battle, I already had confidence issues, and then on top of that, I had to kind of keep fighting and advocating for myself. So that didn't help. My first mentor had actually, at first it seemed very professional, and then, he propositioned me eventually, and I was shocked and I'm completely naive, and it really rattled me. So, and that person ended up becoming my boss's boss's boss. So at first they were not in my line of chain of command, and then they became in my chain of command. And so because I felt so awkward because I turned this person down, and again, they were in their 40s and I was 25 years old. Yep. And the power imbalance, they were already in an executive position. I honestly thought they were genuinely a supportive mentor, and had just so naive to think they had an ulterior motive through it all. So that also then made me shy away from getting another mentor. I actually didn't until I was in my late 30s. I just avoided it because I didn't know how to navigate that. I hid every time they came to the office. I just hid. I didn't put my hand up for things. Like, it really did affect me, and so kind of slowed things down. So, I mean, like anyone, you've got to navigate the workplace. Yep. But I think for females, or for me, it did have another layer of complexity that I had to keep navigating on top of all of that. So not helpful, which, then I didn't show up very well to my the interviews. I don't think I really put my best self forward. I didn't probably have as good examples because that I could draw on in comparison to my colleagues. So, I think there was just a few things that made it a little bit extra difficult for me. And I think it's getting a lot better, absolutely. And some people don't experience these kinds of things. But I really wish that there is a level of, putting yourself in the female's shoes when when you're outnumbered. And it's not even whatever minority, people who have a different, like they have an accent or they have, different cultural background, that they're a minority in the workplace, that, there's another level of challenge they have to navigate, and being able to be conscious of that if you're in the majority and trying to accommodate or check in, or how can I support you, or what do you need? I think that would have been nice. I don't think anyone ever meant anything bad by the way they operated. You don't know. You just, you're in the majority, and that's how most people, and so it is a challenge. The other aspect is when I did become a mother. So later in my forensic career, I was a mother, and then I was a single mother, and that slowed down my desire to get into leadership because I was balancing so many competing priorities. So I spent a couple of years just, again, laying low, going to work every day, doing what I needed. The organisation was highly flexible and supportive, so it was really amazing, but I didn't choose to try to drive and to get into a leadership position at that time because I needed to know where my energy had to be placed, which was, finding my feet in life and, looking after my daughter. So that also impacted my career and my journey into leadership and the opportunities I'd put my hand up for. That's just a reality we have to navigate, and, that's not everyone's story, So I think it's useful to acknowledge, and that's why I do like to support females in leadership. There's a few times where there were females that didn't want to put their hand up because they were scared they wouldn't be able to handle the pressure and still have their parenting responsibilities, and that's why I'm a real advocate for supporting females to still step into that space, but, redefine what it can look like, how you can do the job differently in a way that keeps a balance that you're happy with, and support them not to carry guilt with them everywhere they go, guilt at the workplace, guilt at home. And so to do it in a way that redefines what success looks like in leadership in those environments. So that's a big part of why I do what I do.
Yeah, and finding your voice. Do you think that helps? Being able as a female to be heard. I think that's something that a lot of females can relate to, which is we can speak in a room, but we feel like if we do, we're not heard as much. So especially when you're surrounded by a lot of males where they can be a lot louder or have louder opinions, so you can easily just sit quiet, be more demure compared to them. And
I think there's two aspects to this. I think there's an aspect where the way we show up as a female can not always be helpful. So I know some leaders, some female leaders, they're quite apologetic. And it's like, okay, let's look at our habits, let's look at how we're showing up and what can we adjust to take some ownership of that aspect. And also then there's the other side of the coin where, I had one, I was a senior leader and I had a team leader under me, and I noticed his habit of speaking over the top of the females. He never let them finish their sentence. So I had a meeting where I just recorded how many times he did it, and I had a chat with him. Lovely, lovely guy. Had no idea he was doing it. And I said, I'm just wondering if you're aware. Like, I just took a little bit of notes and, here's how many times that you did it. And he was really shocked, So again, like partnering on both sides, I think both parties sometimes have a part to play and adjustments to make. So I don't think it's helpful to get into a blame game or feel like a victim as a female. I really don't. I think we're much more empowered than we give ourselves credit for, and can take our power back in so many ways. I work with females. I run a women's coaching and mentoring program for this very reason. How do we show up with presence? What is it? How are we emanating lack of self-confidence? That was me. Like, I can't blame other people. I can't blame my colleague that kept stepping in. I was so lacking confidence, and people could feel it in me. It was in my hesitation to make decisions. I would over-consult with people. I had to own that, and I still to this day have to work on my tendency to go into self-doubt. And so I had to learn, what does it feel like and look like to back myself? Now, that was my journey. So there is a lot that we can do as females, and yes, owning our voice and learning skills in how to do that.
Yeah. I really like the story that you mentioned with your colleague where you recorded it, and when you noted it down and when you spoke to him about it, he didn't realise, because it highlights that a lot of the time women are they can be empowered, but because our own fears stop us from maybe speaking out about it, because a lot of the time the other side can be unaware, or they're just oblivious to that they're doing it, but it's unintentionally happening. And once you do just tell them and confront them about this, they can actually step back and say, oh, I apologize, that wasn't my intention. And it actually creates a more collaborative environment too as a team.
I think it's so important how you approach these moments. I used to come in with anger and judgment as my leading energy and position, and that is not only not fair, it's so not helpful. And it took me a while to really rein myself back in and say, well, hang on a minute, what assumptions am I making? That they're doing it on purpose, that they don't care? I mean, yeah, okay, they have privilege they don't even realise they have. That's not their fault. So how can we work together? If I come at it with a more caring, compassionate, collaborative approach and gentleness, and treating them like, hey, you don't know what you don't know. Like, hey, did you realise this is how it was impacting me? Like, how can we find another way here? It disarms people, and there's an invitation into a new space rather than a stick beating them, and automatically that puts people's defences up. I used to beat people like, you are doing it wrong and how dare you, and I had that kind of a tone. It's so not helpful.
It causes a division too, I think, when you approach things that way within the team, because it just seems like everyone's attacking each other. Whereas if you approach it in a calmer way and you address it in a way where it's just more feedback, like, hey, just letting you know that this is how this is making me feel, I think it would make it a lot more open as well, where everyone can give each other feedback. And at the end of the day, the way one person works in the team uplifts the entire team, because you want to work in unity.
And I think how the leader role models it makes even more of a difference. They set the tone. So I think if I can encourage everyone to do it, but especially leaders.
Yep. Okay. And on that point, so you've worked with senior ranks, senior executives. What are the most common challenges even highly capable leaders face?
Do you know what? So fascinating to me. When I was coaching leaders in the Federal Police, it was part of my role for a few years, I was so surprised at how their leaders' self-doubt, but their imposter syndrome was so common among all leaders, male, female, didn't matter. I was so shocked. And so people that would come with, I thought they were so confident, they had a bravado to them, was just a cover for, I was so shocked. There's our own internal challenges always, that being actually quite common. So also I think it's helpful to know that and normalise that a little bit. So don't be so hard on yourself. Like everyone feels like I'm out of my depth.
Yeah.
Like I've just been promoted. Am I really going to be able to do this role? And I think a big challenge is I mean, in that environment, there's a challenge to constantly, well, in any leadership, but to hold tensions. So what I mean by that is you want to get results, but you don't want to drive people so hard. You want to make it sustainable. You don't want to burn people out, but they need to move faster. You need to get more results. You want to get quick wins. There's always more to do than there are people and resources to do it. So you're always pushing. So there's this tension to get outcomes and also maintain relationships, spend time building trust. That takes time and energy, you know. So being able to constantly manage those tensions and have good boundaries, knowing where to prioritise and feeling the discomfort of having to say no to things that, especially in policing, it's so important. Like, how do you say no to any job that comes your way? But at some point, there's just not enough resources. Like, there's always going to be more crime than there are police to investigate it. Like, that's an enduring challenge. So being able to sit with discomfort of having to say no, making the hard calls. I work with leaders in state government that have had to do massive restructures that meant heaps of people would lose their job and downsizing. And that's hard. Like that is so hard to have to do that and have those difficult conversations. So I think they're the challenges that, finding a way to do it as authentically as possible, as compassionately as possible, but still stepping in to taking the action that needs to be taken.
Yeah, I do think these are the key ingredients for making an effective leader versus just holding the title. From what you've said, it seems like. So going into a little bit about finding your own practice, because that's another realm on its own. How did it feel stepping into entrepreneurship and what motivated it?
I had it in the back of my mind before I left the Federal Police, but I ended up, jumping into another full-time employed position, and I was very happy about that. I learnt a lot. So it was something in the back of my mind, but the reason I'd been thinking about it is I was getting to a point where there was some frustration in me not having full ownership of the types of programs I wanted to design or the leadership strategies I felt like I wanted to put in place, or being able to work more on coaching and the stuff that I really wanted to do. And I had some people in the industry that I really wanted to work with more and contribute to their projects and their vision. So at some point, I knew I was always going to go into working in consulting and running my own business. I didn't think it would happen as quickly as it did. I thought I would stay in my role in the government a little bit longer, but I found that I was getting, at some point I felt I had to box myself a bit too much to kind of stay operating in that environment. And I remember saying to myself one day, like, if it sounds a little bit morbid, but, if I'm on my deathbed in like 5 years, like what would I regret? And this would have been my regret, not like letting fear, or I have this habit of I need to learn more, I need to know more before I do it. And I thought, enough of that, just rip the Band-Aid off, just do it. You will find your way. You're going to make mistakes. Just hurry up and start because you're not going to be able to avoid them. And that's a really hard thing to do when you're, in your late 40s and you have to feel like you're a novice again and not great at I don't have a role model or anybody that I can say how to run a business, per se. I mean, my mum has run her business for a long time, and she's a therapist, massage therapist, and does body work and amazing. But in the consulting arena, and I wanted to partner with other people already running their businesses and be involved, but also run my own training and development. And I just didn't know how that was going to look, let alone all the nuts and bolts of running a business and doing your accounting and having all the right support structures around me for all of that. So it's been a journey of being willing to not know, ask questions, seek help, and, that can sometimes be a bit daunting.
Yeah, but you just got to be brave and courageous and take that step, because you learn as you go.
You have
There's
to start.
no better way to just do it than just start. Yeah, just do it. Yeah. What values from the Federal Police do you think helped you as you went into the business?
I've taken with me this, do what really feels right to me. I think that's actually what's motivated me to go into a business where I have a bit more ownership of what I do get involved in and what I don't. So my integrity is pretty high, and I wanted to really live in alignment with it as much as possible. So I wanted a little bit more ownership of being able to do that. Not that I, working in my government roles, it was bad per se, but I was too low in the pecking order to really be driving some of the strategy. And I did think about, do I stay and get into higher leadership positions so that I could drive strategy? And that was tempting for me, but there's something about, I really like the fun stuff. I want to be what they call on the tools. I want to be doing the coaching. I don't want to be spending full time in executive or leadership positions. I actually like doing the doing. I want to be up facilitating. I want to be at the coalface of working with leaders. And that, knowing what drives me, I think my heart, my work ethic, the pushing through, the grit, that has come with me. And just knowing that I can do hard things and I will find a way. So
yeah, and you've learned a lot about yourself, obviously, as a leader and leadership in general. It's impacted you personally, I would assume, through this entire journey.
I am very dedicated to be a constant learner of myself, and I think that is one of the key elements of, research shows that the most effective leaders, that it's the highest correlation to effective leadership, is self-awareness and being a learner, a personal learner. And even now, I'm still learning things about myself, habits that I have that I realise, that's from my childhood, why I have this pattern of this. And so I'm still growing the muscle of how do I change that habit? Like, I'm not there yet. I find myself falling back into old patterns. Okay, right. But my awareness is now there. And so I'm constantly learning about myself. And each new environment, something shows up different. Different fears show up. And I'm like, okay, so what's going on for me now? And that's probably the one thing that I would say is the core foundation of the most effective leaders, is that they're willing to learn about themselves. Their self-awareness is high. They know their strengths. They know their weaknesses. They are willing to manage their weaknesses. Like, if you're really good at high-level strategy, you're not good at the detail and implementation. Okay, great. But know that about yourself and partner with someone who's great with the implementation, because you need both. Otherwise, you get nowhere. You've got lots of ideas and nothing ever lands. So be really willing to listen to people that are the implementers to say, okay, but first step is this, So know your weaknesses and have good strategies to manage that. You don't have to be good at everything. So knowing yourself is the first step, and then being willing to listen, be receptive, and do something about it. Do something about your bad habits or things that are not landing. Like be forever experimenting with yourself constantly.
Yep. And this is something I think people listening in can take away from this story, is how you can lead with success, transformation, and leading, most importantly, with authenticity. The last thing I'll ask you before we let you go is, what would you tell your younger self at the start of her federal police journey, and just at the start of this entire journey? What would you tell her now if you could go back?
I would tell her to relax.
Okay.
Like, relax. Like, your best effort is good enough. Like, have some more fun. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, take it easy. Take it easy on yourself, and just enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all tell ourselves to do, but it's a lot harder until in hindsight, when we can look back and say, I was too hard on myself. I should have enjoyed it while I was younger.
Well, I'm trying to do that now with this new shift in my career. So I have to catch myself constantly, but it's a regular practice to just go, okay, don't be so hard on yourself. You're actually doing really well. You will get there. Have fun. Allow yourself to have fun with this project. It's not all serious, and so. No, thank you for taking us through your journey. It's been very inspiring to listen into. I think there's a lot that we can take away from it, and I really appreciate you taking through all of that. It's lovely to have you. Thank you. It's lovely to be here.